In the cold winter of 1326, a woman stood at the gates of London, not as a bride, not as a queen in silks and jewels, but as a conqueror. Her name was Isabella of France, daughter of a king, wife of a king, and the woman who would bring one of England's most infamous reigns to an end. Born in 1295, Isabella entered the world already surrounded by power and danger. She was the daughter of Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, a ruler feared for his cunning and ruthless political maneuvering. From childhood, Isabella was more than just a princess. She was trained in diplomacy, well-versed in court intrigue, and schooled in the subtle art of making allies and destroying enemies. At the age of 12, Isabella was married to King Edward II of England. It was a union meant to seal peace between two powerful nations, France and England, but instead, it became a storm of betrayal, humiliation, and vengeance. Edward II was not like other kings. While Isabella came to England prepared to play the role of loyal wife and queen, she soon discovered her husband's heart, and his trust, belonged to another man, Piers Gaveston, a charming but arrogant knight who quickly became Edward's closest companion. The king lavished Gaveston with titles, gifts, and influence, while his young queen was left in the shadows. At court, whispers spread. Isabella, the daughter of the mighty Philip the Fair, was being neglected, even humiliated. And though she remained outwardly composed, her pride, and her sense of political destiny, burned with quiet rage. The tension at the English court only grew worse. Gaveston's arrogance earned him the hatred of the powerful English barons. They saw him not only as a threat to their influence, but as an insult to the realm itself. His mockery of the nobles, his lavish lifestyle at the king's expense, all of it fueled a dangerous resentment. In 1312, this resentment exploded. A faction of lords captured Gaveston, and without the king's permission, executed him. Edward II was devastated. Isabella, however, watched quietly. She had not orchestrated Gaveston's death, but she understood the lesson it carried. Those who challenged the barons rarely survived. For a time, Isabella and Edward's marriage steadied. They had children together, including the future Edward III, and Isabella played the role of mediator between her husband and the restless nobility. She earned a reputation for her beauty, intelligence, and diplomatic skill, but her loyalty to Edward was not infinite. Then came the king's next great obsession, Hugh Despenser the Younger. If Gaveston had been arrogant, Despenser was ruthless. He manipulated the king, seized lands, and enriched himself through intimidation. Worst of all, he treated the queen with open disrespect, cutting off her access to power and even confiscating her estates. By 1324, the situation had reached a breaking point. War broke out between England and Isabella's homeland of France over disputed territories. Edward, trusting only Despenser, stripped Isabella of her lands and placed her household under strict watch. The proud French princess had been reduced to a powerless pawn in her husband's game, but Isabella was no ordinary pawn. She was already planning her revenge. In 1325, Edward sent her to France to negotiate peace. He thought she was beaten. Instead, she found her freedom. Once in Paris, she refused to return to England. She began building alliances, not just with her brother, King Charles IV of France, but also with English exiles who despised the Despensers. Among them was a man who would become her lover and partner in rebellion, Roger Mortimer. In the safety of the French court, Isabella and Roger Mortimer began plotting the unthinkable, the overthrow of a reigning king. It was dangerous, even treasonous, but Isabella had nothing left to lose. Edward II's cruelty and the Despensers' greed had left her humiliated, stripped of wealth, and separated from her children. The pair moved carefully at first, gathering support among exiled English nobles and mercenaries. Mortimer, an experienced commander, secured promises of troops from sympathetic lords, while Isabella used her royal connections to gather funds and secure ships. The Pope himself, wary of offending the French crown, granted Isabella some diplomatic cover, though he stopped short of endorsing her cause. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer set sail from France with a modest invasion force, just over 1,000 soldiers. It was not a mighty army, but they carried something far more dangerous than sheer numbers, the hatred of the English people toward the Despensers. When they landed in Suffolk, England erupted. Nobles defected from Edward II in droves, and commoners cheered Isabella's arrival, calling her the she-wolf of France, a nickname meant as both insult and grudging admiration. Her cause became a rallying point for all who despised the king's tyranny. Edward and the Despensers fled westward, hoping to reach loyal strongholds in Wales. But the Queen's forces pursued them relentlessly. By November, the king's allies had deserted him, and the elder Despenser was captured and executed in a brutal public display. Hugh Despenser the younger suffered an even more infamous fate. Condemned as a traitor, he was hanged, drawn, and quartered before a jeering crowd. With the Despensers dead, Isabella turned her attention to Edward himself. Edward II was captured in South Wales in November 1326, betrayed by his dwindling supporters and abandoned by fortune. Isabella ensured that he was treated with the outward respect due to a king, but he was, in truth, her prisoner. She paraded him back through England, a living symbol of her victory. By January 1327, the pressure on Parliament was immense. Nobles, clergy, and commons alike demanded the king's removal. Isabella played her role to perfection, presenting herself as the reluctant queen, torn between duty and loyalty, yet forced to act for the good of the realm. On January 25, 1327, Edward II was formally deposed, the first English king to be removed by Parliament. His 14-year-old son was crowned Edward III, with Isabella and Mortimer serving as regents. The she-wolf of France had achieved the unthinkable. She ruled England without wearing the crown herself. At first, her regency seemed a golden age compared to the chaos of Edward's reign. She restored lands to dispossessed nobles, ended ruinous wars in Scotland, and re-established diplomatic ties with France. But power, as ever, is a dangerous intoxicant. Mortimer, now her closest adviser, and, many whispered, her lover, grew arrogant and autocratic. He accumulated lands and titles, flaunted his influence, and eliminated rivals through swift, often bloody justice. The court began to see Mortimer as a shadow king, and Isabella as his willing accomplice. The most troubling shadow over Isabella's rule, however, was the fate of Edward II. Though officially said to have died of natural causes, in September 1327 while imprisoned at Berkeley Castle, rumors spread of a far more gruesome end, that he had been murdered in a manner so cruel it defied belief. Chroniclers whispered of a red-hot poker and a crime committed in silence, leaving no outward mark. Whether Isabella ordered his death remains one of medieval England's most enduring mysteries. By 1330, Edward III had grown restless under the dominance of his mother and Mortimer. Now 17, the young king gathered loyal allies and, in a daring coup, seized Mortimer at Nottingham Castle. Within weeks, Mortimer was executed for treason, and Isabella was stripped of her political power. Unlike many fallen rulers, Isabella's life was spared. She was granted a generous income and retired to Castle Rising in Norfolk, where she lived in comfort, though under discreet watch, for nearly 30 years. She spent her final decades in quiet luxury, dabbling in religious patronage and maintaining correspondence with her French kin. When she died in 1358, she was buried with honor in the Franciscan church at Newgate, London, wearing the habit of the Poor Clares. On her chest lay a silver casket, said to contain the heart of Edward II. Whether this was a gesture of guilt, love, or political theater, no one could say. History would remember Isabella of France in many guises, as the loyal wife betrayed by her king, the cunning conspirator who toppled a monarch, the ruthless she-wolf, and the survivor who lived to old age in a world where power usually devoured its holders. Her story, like the age she lived in, was a tapestry woven of ambition, betrayal, and the cold steel of survival.